So before we dive into this final video, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where things have progressed since the last video. If you remember, we'd got all the systems in, we got the spine rigged, the legs rigged, the arms rigged, and we'd talked about locking off attributes which aren't used, which I've gone through and done now, but I've also added in some finger joints. And you can open the file that's supplied with this tutorial and have a look at this yourself, but it's basically just a basic, if we look at the pinky finger there for example, it's just a basic FK setup. So you can move the root and then that will also rotate the joints below it. So I've done that for each finger and the thumb, and then I've put that into another group called hand icons. Made sure the pivot for that is where the wrist is, and then as you can see I've used a parent constraint and constrained it to the main wrist joint. And what that means is as the arm moves around, the controls are going to follow that too. The same way when you rotate it. And because it's constrained to the main wrist joint and not the FK wrist joint or the IK wrist joint, when we blend between IK and FK, the finger controls will just follow that. Now I was going to do a video showing how to do the fingers, but I think, you know, after everything you've learnt so far, that's quite an easy step, just creating the joints, creating the icons. You know, I just use the same root control icons that we've got here and then just added those in. So that's the fingers pretty much done. So like I said right at the beginning of this course, of this particular part of the course, at the end of each section I want you to have a rig that is usable, that you can then attach a skin to and then use it to pose. And up to now we've been working on this, but we've not actually attached the skin to it. So what I'm going to run through now is, and this part isn't included in the magazine because I ran out of room. So, but I wanted to do a video to explain this next step, because skinning this character isn't as easy as just binding the skin. There are a few extra steps that you need to do to make it work as a successfully skinned character. Now the main issues are going to lie with the limbs. But basically all we're going to do to start off with is get the models, and I'm just going to hide the systems because we don't want to worry about them for now. We just want the base skeletons. And what we can do is I'm just going to select the arms, select hierarchy. I'll just select all the joints. In fact, I'll just close them down then because I didn't need to open those up. And because the model of the arms is separate, I can just go to skin, bind skin, open this up, bind to selected joints. You know, it doesn't really matter what this is set to. In fact, I think if I reset the settings, you can have it set to joint hierarchy and just select the roots. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to drop down the maximum influences to 3 because I only want the vertices to be influenced by maybe 2, possibly 3 joints. Maybe 2, but I'll put 3 just for now. Just click apply. So now the arm should follow, as you can see, and it can stretch. So you could go in and we could start fixing the weights on this, and luckily it's quite a nice segmented model, and what you'll notice is well, it'll highlight the problem we've got. So what I like to do when I'm working on weights is just go to component editor, particularly if I'm working on something like this, like a robot where it's got defined sections, and I'm just going to go to vertex, select those, to shell, which is going to select all the vertices, and then if we go over to smooth skins, which it's already on, I'm going to set that value to 1 there, which means it's just going to follow the shoulder, which is fine until, well, let me just show you. So if I set that to 1, so that is only being influenced by the shoulder now, which is fine. We can move around like so, and that works fine. Then, but as soon as you start stretching, it's going to stick to the shoulder there. Now we could say, oh, well, we'll have half of it influenced by the elbow and then half by the shoulder, and then it's going to stretch, isn't it? So I'm just going to hide the joints because it's going to start selecting them. So let's say we select half. Well, because I've done this, we need to just go in and use the paint weight tool. Skin, paint skin weights. Select the left elbow, and I'm just going to paint a few weights on there. In fact, we'll just go around and just paint them on instead of using the component editor for this particular part, just to demonstrate. Now, ideally, we'd get a nice blend going down here, so we'd have this influenced a value of 1, then 0.75, then 0.5, then 0.25, so you get a nice blend. But I'm not going to spend too much time doing that because it's not ultimately what we're going to be looking for. So now if we stretch, yes, the whole thing stretches with the arm. I mean, I know this bit here isn't right because we haven't painted the weights on that yet, but I'm just trying to illustrate the issue. But then if we come in and the arm bends, you see, because these are weighted to the elbow, if I just bring the joint back, you see they rotate out like that. So that's the problem we have with this particular setup. Because there's only 3 joints, you're going to come into problems with the with weighting and what you weight things to. Like I showed you previously, if we just weight this section to the shoulder, then the stretchiness doesn't work. Weight it between the shoulder and the elbow, and the stretchiness works, but then when you bend the elbow, half of the upper arm comes out. So we need to do some more tweaking to the rig just to make it a bit more user friendly. So I'm just going to go to there, skin, here we go, unbind skin, reset the settings because we want to delete the history because we don't want that influenced anymore because we're going to do some tweaking. So again, we'll just look at the left arm for now, and then you can apply the same thing to the rest of the limbs. So ideally what we need is another joint where the elbow is and another joint where the wrist is. So basically this upper arm section, we will blend the weights between the shoulder and the elbow, but we'll be blending between the shoulder and a dummy elbow joint. And that dummy elbow joint, it will move with the elbow, but it won't rotate. So basically, when we bend the elbow, you won't get that issue of the vertices that are influenced up here rotating out because they will be influenced by another elbow joint that isn't rotating. So let's just go in and show you what I mean. It probably sounds more confusing than it actually is. So I'm just going to duplicate the elbow, duplicate the wrist, and then I'm just going to make sure we don't have any other joints underneath. And I'm just going to call that bind, just so it differentiates between the normal wrist and elbow. So the wrist is parented to the elbow, which is fine, and the elbow is parented to the shoulder. So at the moment we can move that around and those joints are just going to follow anyway. If I just go to display, local rotation axes, so as we can see that works fine because the joint isn't rotating with the elbow, but it's keeping the same orientation as the shoulder. So we can essentially use that then to bind that to. So let me just quickly go in and we will just create, we'll select that. We'll select the both of them. We'll select the arms, and I'm just going to go to skin, bind skin. And now what we need to do is just go in and edit the weights. So if I do, we'll just paint them, I think, for now, just to make things easier. So left shoulder, we want that fully influenced. So let's just scale that down so we can get to the value attribute down here. So if we say the left elbow, so we don't want this influenced by the elbow joint. So let's set that to 0. Because if it's influenced by just the elbow joint, then we'll end up with this portion of the arm bending out as the elbow bends. If we go to elbow bind, and again, we don't want that influencing the lower arm, so I'm just going to flood that to remove any influence. So the elbow bind, we're basically going to say, right, we want that fully influenced there. Like so. And then we'll drop down to 0.75. So we're sort of gradually decreasing the influence as it moves up the arm. 0.5. And as you can see, it's getting slightly less white, more grey. And then 2.5. Just make that a bit smaller. So I just held down B then just to change the brush size. And then let's just check that in reverse. We'll check that the shoulder is working. That's fine. We've got a nice graduation down there, but we need to remove the influence from there. So I'm going to set that to 0 because we don't want the shoulder joint influencing this elbow area. So I'll just paint over that. Or what we could do is we could just select the geometry, go to UV shell, and then we can just flood that at 0 because it'll just affect the vertices that are selected. So if I move the arm like so, you can see that it bends all right, although this section here should probably be influenced by the wrist. So I'm just going to select that to the shell. So we want that to rotate to stay with this upper arm. So go back to there. So we want that to be fully controlled by that. So let's just flood that like so. So that's going to give us a much nicer. So there we've got a bend and we've got sort of the ball and socket. And then if we scale that out, and the problem is because we've added this joint, but it's parented to the shoulder so that it maintains the orientation. What we need that to do is follow the elbow joint. But obviously we don't want it to follow this elbow joint because this elbow joint is being driven by the IK-FK. Ideally, we want to be able to access this functionality whether we're in IK or FK. So it may make sense for us to just, let's reset the position of this. It may make sense for us to set these joints to also be affected by the IK and the FK. So let's just find the system's left arm. There we go, we've got those there. And we're just going to do exactly like we did before, and we're just going to use the same nodes. So the wrist, IK, FK, but we want the wrist bind, and I'm just going to go constrain point. Because we want the position, but we don't want the orientation, otherwise it will bend just like the elbow and the wrist do, and we don't want that. So apply there, and then we want the elbow IK, FK, and then we want the elbow bind, and click apply. So let's go back to our node editor. We'll just clear that out. And we want these new point constraints bringing in, because as we did before, we want to control these attributes. I'm going to bring in the control that has the IKFK attribute on it, and I'm just going to drag that over to the IK initially because I know that's what we want. And then I'm going to just look for the left arm IKFK reverse, bring that in, because we can just use that output as well into the FK. Come on, autosave. It's a good idea to have autosave on in Maya. It does like to crash every now and again. So that should blend between the IK and the FK now. And as you can see, now obviously we haven't painted any weights on the lower arm or the hand, but that is exactly the same setup as we have with the upper arm. So there we have the arm bending, which is fine, and it will stretch. And because of how we've got the joint set up, it works quite well because we've got this section of the robot which is staying solid. It's not deforming, it's just this area here. So it could be that maybe this robot is made out of steel on the joints, but in between it's maybe some sort of flexible material. I mean, we can say that, I guess. It'll work for this. And we've got the FK IK switching. So let's go in and just do the lower arm. And we can do it exactly like we did before. Let's close that. Paint the weights. So again, we want the elbow we want it fully affected there, and then so maybe we go down to wrist bind, and I'm just going to get rid of that influence completely. So wrist bind, we know we want down here to be controlled fully by the wrist. I'm just going to paint the hand just to help keep things tidy, but you know, you can go in and just paint all the weights yourself, you know, just to get all the correct weighting. There'll be a file. I'm going to continue working on this, and then there will be a file which I'll load in shortly and show you it all nicely weighted and all working. So we'll keep that weighted to the wrist, and it may be that we maybe just do this to shell just to speed things up. Flood. I missed a bit in there. Yep, likely there. Let's try that. So that was wrong. Let's undo that. We'd selected that by mistake there. So let's try that again. Flood, that's popped that back there. Then we have a few stray vertices in there, which I'll just paint to shell, flood. Right, that's got it. So now we've got that joint at the wrist, and then we can come in, keep pressing the wrong button. So we want that to be influenced. Ooh. Okay. We'll do it this way. That's one. Won't let me, there we go. Right. 0.75, just as we did with the other side, with the upper arm, 0.75. Then we'll reduce that to 5. Won't let me change the brush size for some reason, so I'll just do it in here. There we go, and then 2.5, and it's doing this again. Something weird going on with it today. There we go. So just going to check those weights. So that needs to be, go back to the elbow, because we edited those inadvertently earlier. There we go, that's fixed that. So there we go. Obviously we haven't painted the weights on the hand yet, but there you have now, we've got a stretchy limb, and it will blend between IK and FK. You know, and you've got the nice stretchiness in there as well. So I'm just going to pause the video now while I go through, and I'm just going to paint the weights on everything else, and so I will be back in a minute. So I've gone through and I have painted all the weights and updated everything. Now, painting the weights on a model like this is quite easy to do. It's quite straightforward. So you could use some of the techniques I was using before, select the vertices and then just flood them a certain value, or just hand paint them, or even use a component editor. But now, as you can see, this bit at the bottom, we've got the hip wiggle, like so. We've got full control over the upper spine, you know, the spine, the torso, the head. We've got all the stretchy limbs working, so we can stretch him out like so. So you can have some fun playing around with this character. And I've also gone in and painted the weights on the fingers, so they'll work. And obviously we've got a bit of a bend up here as well, just to get some of that secondary animation in there. But there we go. So throughout this first part of this series, we have completely rigged a character from start to finish. He has IKFK functionality, stretchy limbs, and I've also shown you how to add a couple of extra joints into the limbs, which will allow you to then paint the weights and get the stretchiness and the bend in the limbs and the wrists and the ankles all working correctly. Now, you can end this here, and you can just use this rig as it is. It's perfectly good for animation and for you know, if you just want to quickly pose your character. But what we're going to do is, in the next part of this series, we are going to look at adding more functionality to the limbs. So rather than being stretchy, we're also going to allow you to create sort of an S curve in the limbs as well, so you can have more of a cartoony sort of effect going on as well. And we'll also add that functionality into the spine, so you can have more fluid movements, more expressive movements. So keep an eye out for that in a future issue of 3D World, and I'm sure they will post it online at some point as well. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you have any questions and tell me what future videos you would like to see. And why not say thanks and also earn exclusive rewards with a small donation via my Ko-fi page. As always, remember to like this tutorial and subscribe to my channel, and remember to hit that bell icon so you're kept up to date with notifications on future videos and posts. This is Ant CGI signing off, and I will see you on the next one.